Cartier, Rolex, Gucci, Prada, Jordan, Adidas, Bottega Veneta. At eBay, it's real or it's getting the fake out. eBay's team of luxury authenticators make sure that you never get faked over. Watches inspected by watch aficionados, sneakers checked by legit sneakerheads, handbags examined by handbag connoisseurs, and jewelry in the scopes of expert gemologists. The details inspected, the fakes rejected. Ensure your next purchase is the real deal with eBay's authenticity guarantee. Everyone deserves real. Visit ebay.com for terms.
On game night, there's only one food delivery service that's a slam dunk, a home run, a hole-in-one, a touchdown. Sorry, got carried away. When it comes to game night eats, late night treats, lazy lunches, family dinners, and more, it's all on Grubhub. When cooking isn't in the cards, go Grubhub. Amazon Prime members get a year of Grubhub Plus for free, so you pay zero delivery fees when you order. Visit goforgrubhub.com/Amazon for details. And of course, this holiday season, Grubhub gift cards are the perfect gift for everyone on your list. Download the Grubhub app today. Go for Grubhub.
This holiday, Audible invites you to listen in on some of today's most creative musicians telling their stories in their own words. Origins is an Audible Originals podcast series featuring music and memories from artists like Billie Eilish, Camilo, Doja Cat, Flying Lotus, and more. Discover what shaped their creativity and get drawn into the immersive sound design that lets you feel the experiences that inspired them. Start listening to this innovative new series at audible.com/origins.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. What's up, team? Hopefully this week is uneventful. I pray that it's uneventful. I'm actually recording this on Monday, so it's a couple of days before the presidential inauguration, and hopefully that goes smoothing. Smoothing? Is that even a word? Smoothly. How about that? But you are here to join a discussion about independent music from the people that create it, from the people that love it, from the people that shape it. That's what we do on this podcast. If you are joining now, you got about 8 years worth of content to go through. Dive back in the archives, find some interviews with people you like, and then come along on this journey because we'll be here. I'll be here for many, many years to come because this is just something I feel incredibly passionate about. And even as I get older, I find myself being more and more entrenched within the idea of how important this music community is. So, anyways. This person is also a lifer, and his name is Bryan Funck. He plays in a band called Thou, and Thou is an incredibly prolific and inspirational band in many ways because they have done the whole thing, very DIY, very punk, hardcore oriented in regards to the way they, book shows, put out records, collaborate with a ton of friends. And the band's been, existing for quite some time. I actually just, probably within the past 6 or 8 months or so, kind of unlocked Thou. They'd always been this band that kind of existed in my periphery where I was aware of the band, enjoyed what they did, but never really dove head deep into it. And they released a compilation of all of their Nirvana covers. And I'd known that they had done these, on a variety of different tribute comps and just kind of on their own. But hearing them all in summation, I was like, this band is unbelievably devastating, just so good. And then on the heels of that, they released their split with Emma Ruth Rundle. And I at that point, that's when Thou became unlocked to me. And I dove into their entire catalog, and I had to have Bryan on the show. So that's what we did. This is actually the second time we recorded this conversation because the first time, for whatever reason, his side of the audio became corrupted. And I went through like 17 different problem-solving solutions to try to get that audio, and for whatever reason, it didn't happen. But we made it happen now. Bryan was a great chat. Come to find out, he's a huge metalcore nerd like myself, and so I felt like I was talking to a friend who I didn't know yet. But let's talk about how you can interact with the show. 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Always email the show, ideas, guest stuff, whatever it is you want feedback on. Just hit me up because I love to hear from people. And then you can also, of course, go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review. It takes you like 30 seconds at the most. You can also write some kind words if you want to. That stuff all helps the show, which I'm not going to go into the minutia and details why, but there's a reason that people asks you to do that. And I'm just another one of those people that's asking you. So here we go. Here's our chat with Bryan. And yeah, let's do it.
The thing that I have always found interesting about Thou is that you guys, like, you could exist in a lot of different places in regards to geographically speaking, but it makes so much sense you exist in Louisiana just because you're a band that sits at the intersection of so many different heavy music genres that so many bands from Louisiana also kind of sit in that, from, like I Hate God and like bands of that nature, where it's like, you're metal, you're hardcore, you're punk, you have all these things kind of combined into one. Do you notice that being something that is kind of part of the, I guess, the heavy music of Louisiana, or is that me just reading way too far into it?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think that in general, you sort of have to, at least in New Orleans, you have to have a sort of punk attitude about things, because it's just not like one of these, like big shot towns where there's a lot going on or there's a lot of opportunities. You sort of have to be, willing to do whatever it takes to either play a show or, even just like get a band together with like finding people who are interested in the same thing as you and, have any sort of like skill with like playing an instrument or whatever. I think it can be kind of difficult down here. I mean, New Orleans is sort of like a big small town, like it's not like one of these, I don't know, one of these like metropolitan cities where there's like a lot of people to choose from and a lot of people are into like a lot of different kinds of music to pull from. I mean, you're pulling in whoever you can. And I think also like New Orleans just sort of breeds a certain kind of person that, even if they aren't like a punk per se, they're there's more of a willingness to sort of like, I don't know, get your hands dirty or something. Or there's like a friendliness that like, I think lends itself to like the spirit of punk, like the, sense of community or like, some kind of, willingness to work towards some kind of community, even if it's just being like, I don't know, polite and courteous to other people or friendly, maybe a little too overly friendly. Did it even answer the question?
Well, no, I mean, it didn't directly answer the question, but you painted a picture of the idea that, because there are more limited options, that it does, kind of make you work with people that have all of these, disparate influences, as opposed to like, oh yeah, I'm going to enlist, 3 hardcore kids that like the same exact bands as I do, and we're probably going to spit out something that sounds exactly like the bands that we like, as opposed to like, well, here's a person that's like kind of into this stuff. Like they like heavy music, but they like a lot of different stuff. So it can kind of influence that.
Right. I mean, and like for me, like coming from like a hardcore background or whatever, interest in like a very specific kind of hardcore, for the longest time I could count the amount of people in New Orleans who listen to the same stuff as me on 2 hands, one hand for a long time. So in terms of like starting a band, whatever that's going to sound like, you definitely have sort of like limited resources in terms of people you're trying to pull in. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of it in terms of like how it reflects on us specifically. I mean, I don't know. Like I think like in terms of like Thou, like we didn't, like when they started this band, there was sort of like a clear idea of like the sound they were going for, which is like a post-rock thing. But even that, like, I don't know if more than like two or three of those guys were even listening to that stuff. And it was, they were still just grabbing people who were like their friends, in their peer group. So I think it's more about that, like who you resonate with personally, more so than like what your musical leanings potentially will be,
And I do think that you are correct in the idea that, I mean, especially when you are starting to get together with people and be creative, you may have the idea of a band sounding a certain way, but then, maybe not relatively quickly, but you'll be able to see the different directions you start to head as you start to, put out more stuff and tour and get all these experiences. You'll be like, oh yeah, we wanted to sound like this band, but that did not end up what we shot out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've heard those guys say too that, I was looking at some interview, some like bass interview Mitch did recently. And he was saying that like the Vouch sound sort of changed when I joined just because of the screaming versus like the singing vocals. But, I don't even know if that's necessarily true because, when I joined, they already had that first record written, which is still like a heavy record. And they had that record written and recorded. And I came in and just put vocals on it, which was definitely different than what they were doing before. But, I think they were already sort of like heading down a certain path, organically, even without the screening. And maybe me joining and like, my push for like, coming from like the hardcore metalcore stuff, maybe that did push it in a certain direction. Since a lot of us were listening to like heavier stuff at the time. But yeah, it's definitely like a sort of organic thing. You sort of just find your way with it. And I think with us, we're continuing to do that. We're continuing to like explore our sound and our interests and push it in ways that are engaging for us. I mean, I think that's why like we have all these different records where, it's a lot of them are sort of a departure from like the standard stuff we're maybe more known for in terms of like metal stuff.
Yeah. Well, you can be, especially with how prolific you guys are, the idea that you can, step more out on limbs and, do splits and do covers and all this stuff. It's like, well, yeah, like why wouldn't we do that? Because we want to like explore that, pardon the metaphor, but the branch of the tree or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know you yourself kind of putting the focal point on you. I mean, I know you were born and raised in a suburb of Baton Rouge, right? I can't remember the name of the exact town, but where did you come up?
I'm from New Orleans. I'm from a suburb in New Orleans. I'm the only one not from Baton Rouge.
Okay, got it. That's right.
It's Metairie. It's like basically the same like suburb where like Crowbar and Goat Whore and all those bands are from.
What age did you realize that that those bands like existed? Was that much later on in life, or was that like in high school and junior high?
I was probably aware of those bands when I was in high school. A lot of my friends were listening to like Acid Bath and stuff like that in terms of like local stuff. Pantera was like sort of coming out, and not that they were like technically a local band, but they were like sort of loosely associated with New Orleans. But Acid Bath and I Hate God and all that stuff was still real big. I mean, I Hate God used to play on all the like, there used to be like a Sunday hardcore matinee like once a month at this sort of like decrepit punk venue downtown, and they used to play that all the time. So I sort of saw them kind of early on, probably in like my mid to later high school years, something like that.
Got it. Was it, a band like I Hate God, their legend looms large throughout independent music. Was it, I guess, as visceral of experience for you seeing them like playing these, random Sunday matinees and like, because they were, by all definitions, a, local band? Like, did that impact you at all, being like, hey, these guys are doing the thing in my town?
No, I mean, probably not so much. I mean, I wasn't really into them until like later years. Probably the first like, I don't know, 10 years or so, seeing them play at various shows, they would be so trashed and polluted that, they could barely get through a set, and the sets would always sort of like digress into this like violent stuff or like, sort of Mike ranting at the audience or whatever. And, it wasn't till like, maybe like the earlier years of Thou, we ended up playing a couple shows with them, like right after they were, they had just gotten all put on, probation or something where they're getting drug tested and all this stuff. And so they were basically just like smoking that like fake weed that you used to be able to buy from like gas stations or whatever. I don't do drugs, but you know what I'm talking about? There's some kind of like potpourri style, like weed. It was like legal for like 2 seconds. Like here you could buy it at like this record store, head shop. The Mushroom was like the place to get it. But so they were all smoking like that stuff and like, even just like barely drinking. And they were awesome. They were like super tight. Mike was funnier, with his like stage banter between songs and stuff. And I thought that era was great. I mean, I probably haven't seen them very recently, so it's hard for me to gauge how they are now versus then. But yeah, I mean, that compared to like me seeing them growing up was way better.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the reason I bring them up, it's because like usually you have those one or two local bands that, you understand are making a national impact, whether you can articulate that or not. And, I Hate God is just such a weird band because of, their everything that you just described and how, debaucherous they were and how just, nihilistic they were, that it's sometimes hard to put that band in context when, they're to you a local band, so it's kind of weird to, reflect on it like that. And so, as you were growing up and as you started to, develop your identity and, understand kind of, where you sat in the world, did you, like care about school? Did you have like a life path in mind? Was this very much like, once music consumed you, that was the only thing you focused on?
No, I mean, I didn't have a life path in mind. I don't know if I do now. I mean, maybe my life path now is the record shop, maybe, but, no, I mean, I cared about school enough to like get through it and do okay with it. But I'm probably like, not super smart, but too smart for my own good, like smart enough to like screw around and slack off a bit. But that definitely let me, my college years, to like playing in bands and putting on shows, probably way more than I should have been at the time. So yeah, I wouldn't say I was very like school oriented, other than just doing the bare minimum to get through it.
Sure. What did you study in college?
I studied psychology, and I minored in sociology. Although looking back, if I had been smart, I should have taken like business classes. Would have been great, just for like the accounting and tax stuff and graphics design. Any kind of graphic design stuff, like learning how to use PowerPoint and stuff, would have been. I cannot say how much easier my life would be if I knew how to do that stuff, because I do all the design work for Thou, but like I still don't know how to do any of that stuff on the computer. All that stuff I'm like the idea person, sort of like bringing all the art together and like having the idea of like, okay, it has to go like this, but it's always like me sort of browbeating some friend into doing the actual like grunt work for us.
Right. To like pull it together. You're like, Hey, here's all these art files. Can you make this, layout like this?
Yeah. And I'm very like particular and about how I want it to look. So it's a lot of like, no, fix this. This has to move here. This has to be bigger. This has to be smaller. Change this, fix this. So there's definitely a lot of that I think would have been better. You know, if I had taken those, if I had thought, I should take these classes. This will help me. This will be a useful thing in the sphere of things that I like to do. That would have been super helpful. But you know, I was too busy like kind of BSing around, taking interesting psychology classes or some English literature classes and stuff like that. Probably squandered those 4 years.
You were doing the right thing. You were exploring yourself,
Yeah. I wish I hadn't been. I wish I had been. Wish I had been taking some useful classes.
Yeah. Well, hindsight's 2020, as they say.
Yeah.
I know you went to just in previous interviews, you mentioned that you went to like a Jesuit school. Was that in high school? Was that in like an elementary school?
It was high school. It was Jesuit high school here.
Okay. And is that similar to like, I guess, a Catholic high school where, like you're wearing uniforms, that sort of stuff? You're taking, catechism classes and things of that nature?
Yeah, it's a Catholic school and we had to wear uniforms. It was like a step below a military school, I guess. Although when I went, it wasn't, not that it was lax, but it was compared to like a boarding school or something. It was a lot laxer. But New Orleans it's mostly private schools and it's mostly Catholic schools, especially for high school. Like that's if you want a decent education, you basically have to go to a private school. Like the public schools, there's maybe a couple. I mean, it might be different now, but definitely when I was growing up, there was like two that were decent. That were good. Well, actually, one of them was really good, but there were two in Orleans that are good public schools. But definitely like in my neighborhood, even the Catholic schools, even the private schools in my neighborhood aren't that great.
Because you were surrounded by the, religion and having that as a focus, like, was that something you were raised with? Did you, I guess, care about it? Were you just like, well, I'm doing this because I'm here? Where did you kind of sit with that?
No, it wasn't something I was super into. My family isn't very religious. I mean, I grew up Catholic in the sense that I've gone to Catholic school all my life, but I'm not a practicing. No one in my family like practices or like goes to church or whatever. My parents are very like are not very religious, not very political. Just sort of standard blue collar suburban parents. They both kind of grew up in the suburbs. My dad kind of more in like the rougher part of town, and is more of like a hillbilly type. But I don't know. It wasn't a huge thing, other than just being exposed to it in school. Having to take those classes and learn all that stuff and go to mass once a month. Because of school. But it wasn't a huge thing for me in terms of like shaping me or anything. I mean, the maybe some of like the ethics or like the moral lessons were sort of interesting, but I was probably learning just as much from like world religion classes in college or any kind of philosophy stuff I was taking, or just having half a brain.
And as you started to, get into subculture and, hardcore and punk and everything like that, how did your parents react to that? Were they, confused because I'm sure that they had no context for what you were bringing home, or were they pretty permissive and let you kind of do what you needed to?
I mean, they pretty much, I was a good kid. I didn't get into trouble. I made good grades. I rarely got into any kind of trouble, and when I did, it wasn't anything serious. So, I mean, I never had a curfew. They never really bothered me about the music I was listening to. I started driving when I was 15, and they got me a car more so because they didn't want to have to drive me to school. Because like Jesuit, you know, I live kind of way. I grew up kind of way out there in the suburbs, and Jesuit's like in the middle, not downtown, but it's like in New Orleans. You know, so it's a little ways from our house. So you know, I think they got me driving as soon as they could, just so they wouldn't have to bring me to school anymore. You know, but I kind of like ran wild with that. I mean, like having a car early on was like a gateway to finding shows and being able to like explore the city and, you know, basically like stumble upon punk and hardcore shows and be able to get to like wherever I wanted to get to go to them. I mean, even like, especially like my last year of high school, like I would go to shows during a weeknight in high school and stuff. You know, no problems. You know, I was doing well enough at school where they just weren't even that worried about me. So yeah, it was never, none of that stuff was ever really a big issue. I mean, not that they were like into it, or yeah, I mean they weren't into it, or they didn't care about it, or weren't like interested in it at all, or like you know, chatting with me about it. But you know, they definitely weren't trying to stop me.
Rockabilia.com. You hear me talk about it every week, but have you gone to their website? Have you used this code PC100 words to get you 15% off your order? Maybe you haven't, but let's change that today. They are the best place for all of your online merch needs. I love this company. They have so many items from a wide variety of bands. Metal, hardcore, punk, indie rock, whatever it is you are into, they have something that is tailored to your taste and fit. You can dive in and just honestly spend at least an hour perusing their website, putting stuff in your cart, checking out, and using this code PC100 words that will get you 15% off your order. That's essentially me giving you a free shirt, you know, as long as you're ordering enough. But I love this company. I love what they do. Independently run, amazing customer service. They ship from the Midwest, so it'll get to you very quickly. That's it. There's nothing more to say other than go to rockabilia.com, use the code PC100 words, and enjoy your band merch as it arrives straight to your door. And let's be honest, it's all officially licensed. None of this horrible bootleg stuff. Because there's so much bootleg stuff that exists now. Rockabilia does not traffic in that. They don't condone that. And they pay the bands directly because this is all above the board stuff. So rockabilia.com.
Let me solve all of your holiday shopping problems right now by talking to you about the premium audio products from Raycon. They have wireless earbuds, headphones, and speakers that offer premium sound. I personally adore the wireless earbuds. I've been using them for 4 or 5 years. They got a ton of battery life. We're talking 54 plus hours. It's incredible. And honestly, I have gotten them for gifts for my significant other. I've gotten them for my family and friends, and they all come back to me and they're like, dude, this is incredible. Why have I never used these before? And I'm like, I don't know. That's your fault. That's why I am here to help you. And for the next month, Raycon will have a countdown to Christmas with a new pop-up flash deal for you to take advantage of every single day. Now, what can you do? You can go to buyraycon.com/Ray and get the best deals around. That gets you 15% off site-wide with code HOLIDAY plus free shipping. That is code HOLIDAY at buyraycon.com/Ray for 15% off your Raycon purchase and then free shipping. So again, go to buyraycon.com/Ray, solve all of your shopping problems, and then maybe, toss a pair of headphones there for you. Okay? Maybe just an idea, but thank you, Raycon, and buy them now.
If you're hearing this song on your phone, in your car, or in aisle 7 of the grocery store, you're not really hearing it. You're not really hearing the hypnotic disco synth as clearly as you could. You're not really feeling the bass line in your chest. And you're certainly not hearing a century of sound innovation. The only way to hear this song the way the artist intended is to hear it on a Denon home speaker. A speaker built with as much craft, dedication, and precision as the music it plays. Which means you won't just hear the song, you'll feel it. Denon home wireless speakers, crafted by the sound obsessed, for the sound obsessed.
America is obsessed with true crime stories. Everywhere you go, you hear people talking about their favorite true crime podcasts. And all that excitement has made you a little crime curious. But with so many true crime podcasts to choose from, the real mystery is, where do you start? iHeartPodcasts has cracked the case. They created iHeart True Crime Plus, your source for the best true crime podcasts, all in one channel. iHeart True Crime Plus brings you the best of true crime, with shows that cover everything from unsolved murders and missing persons to heists, organized crime, and everything in between. So you're sure to find something you'll want to binge and share. And as an iHeart True Crime Plus subscriber, you'll also enjoy ad-free listening, early access to select episodes, and exclusive never-before-heard bonus content. Feed your true crime obsession. Subscribe to iHeart True Crime Plus today, exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
I know, just because, after our first conversation, we started to, really nerd out over text in regards to metalcore and how deep our, obscure knowledge is for that. It sounds like that was your entry point in regards to more subculture-y sort of stuff and understanding like how these bands interact with one another and, the idea of like putting on shows and stuff like that. What kind of drew you in initially to, bands of that nature? Was it the, like the energy of the shows? Was it, kind of a combination of all these things? Like what sort of drew you in initially?
I don't know. Cause I went straight from, like the grunge stuff and alternative stuff, like almost directly into hardcore. Like I didn't, I was briefly into like the kind of third wave ska punk stuff, which I sort of liked because of the less of the ska and more like the sort of like frenetic punk energy. But I was into that for like 2 seconds and then like super into hardcore. And it was sort of like, Pearl Jam, you see Eddie Vedder wearing like a Fugazi shirt and then you sort of get to Minor Threat somehow. And, going backwards from Rage Against the Machine to get to like Inside Out. And then, at the time I think I was sort of like interested in punk, and a few of people that I was sort of like becoming friends with, I knew they were into punk, or I thought they were into punk, and basically had them like make me mixtapes and stuff. And I want to say like right around that time, one of my buddies had just discovered that Victory Style 1 sampler. And that was like pretty much a gateway into like all that hardcore bands of that, like metalcore stuff. And, I think from there, one of us got like a very, very distribution catalog. And, we would just go through that catalog and just highlight records that we wanted to get. Oh, it sounds like Earth Crisis. Sounds like this, sounds like that. Vegan straight edge moshcore. Like we would just highlight it, and I would get some and he would get some, and we would just like make tapes for each other or trade records back and forth. And it just kind of snowballed. I mean, show wise, there was definitely like a handful of shows that were like pretty exciting, but New Orleans was like, not a lot of those bands were coming through here. I mean, that's like pretty much the main reason why I got into booking shows for so long, is because, the bands I wanted to see weren't playing New Orleans. So I would basically, get the record, and there'd be an address in the record, and I'd write them a letter and say, hey, if you want to come play New Orleans, like, here's my number, blah, blah, blah. And then when I started college, I got an email address and I started emailing all these bands, and, it just kind of went from there. But, yeah, I mean, it's basically because the bands I wanted to see weren't playing New Orleans that I kind of started booking shows or whatever. But yeah, so I don't know. Definitely I don't know how to like what exactly drew me in. I don't know. I mean, I definitely remember like when I got Destroy the Machines and started reading all the lyrics and stuff, and sort of like seeing the sort of like political militance of a band like Rage Against the Machine applied to like veganism and straight edge was just sort of like a little eye opening to me, that you could like, there would be bands that were like felt so strongly about stuff like that. I mean, not that I was vegan at the time, and I didn't even really claim straight edge till I was like in my early 20s. But I don't know. It just seemed amazing to me, and wanted, kind of made me want to dig a lot deeper into these things. And then we would just get all kinds of zines and stuff, and develop a sort of like mythology about these bands, and what we thought the hardcore scene was and all this stuff, because there was no hardcore scene, that we could find in New Orleans.
Well, that's really interesting. The idea that, because you don't have anything, directly in your backyard, you can't be influenced. Like, you're just trying to bring all of these outside influences into, your sphere. And so I like the idea of, especially like you're talking about, going through the very catalog and highlighting things and being like, oh yes, like, you buy the Abnegation CD, and then, maybe I'll buy the Disembodied CD or whatever. Just because I find it funny, I'm sure you guys had some misses where you were like, oh yeah, we bought this record and this isn't that good, but we're still going to listen to it because we just spent, $16 on this CD or whatever. Do you remember any of those, quote unquote disappointments?
Oh, that Abnegation CD for one.
I don't know why I pick on them, but yeah.
I mean,
you're like, this isn't that good.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing was, we got an Abnegation by way of that Stones the Mark of Fire compilation, and the song on that comp is awesome. And then we sort of backtrace and maybe got one of those 7-inches or a couple of 7-inches, and that stuff was great. And you get the CD, and the CD's garbage. But yeah, definitely that. And what else? That band Ringworm, not Ringworm, the sort of like tough guy Ringworm, but Ringworm with a U.
Cleveland band.
Not the Cleveland band. I want to say they're a California band.
Right.
Yeah. And that I actually maybe would like that now, thinking back on it. But and they had like this absurd cover of Mexican Radio that I should send it to you. It's incredible.
I like it when, you get into a band like, I'll use an example, like Uniform Choice, where like, you get Screaming for a Change and you're like, this record's amazing. And then you don't understand that so many of those hardcore bands then, started to go more rock and, butt metal or whatever. So like, I remember as you started to travel down the rabbit hole and be like, oh dude, like Uniform Choice is a few records after that. And it's like, oh wow, like this is very different, but you're a kid, you're just buying everything.
Yeah. There's definitely stuff where like I couldn't get into it after like the first record, the first 7-inch or whatever.
As you started to get into all of the, punk and hardcore, and you started to want to like actually see these bands and bring them down and, have them play shows and stuff like that. The through line that, I see in your, musical output as well is where it's like, obviously it's very DIY and, I mean, you running the record store and like everything that you do kind of stems from that. And that drive isn't always something that people, I guess, kind of like continue over long periods of time, but you have. Is it just because you don't know any other way? That's kind of like who you are as a person. Like where do you think that kind of comes from inside you?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's partially like that. Maybe it's like a little bit of like control freak thing or at least like wanting to have like a firm handle on having a firm say on certain things, creative control or whatever. Like definitely for like the record shop, like we had sort of like a cushier situation before we moved into like our kind of like permanent spot. And, but we were in a thing where we were in somebody else's space and didn't really have a lot of say over how things looked or this and that. And, even though we're paying for it now, like, moving into our own space, we have like complete control over the way that the space looks and how things set up. Like that's important. And, if it takes a little bit more work to like make that happen, it's worth it, and I don't know. I mean, definitely in terms of like Vow, there's been instances where I don't know. We've had opportunities to do stuff or get involved with things that are maybe outside of like DIY, but the sort of that sort of like punk DIY approach of things, less in terms of like the ideology of it, but more in terms of like the practicality of it. It just makes a lot more sense a lot of times to just like do certain things and I don't know, like certain things. And as I've gotten older, like even more so, like with shows and we go on tour, or like when we play shows and stuff, like sharing gear, like something as simple as like sharing gear, I think is like, I don't know, something I probably wasn't even thinking about 10 or 15 years ago or whatever. And now it's like, yeah, of course, like who wants to fucking drag the same 10 stupid 8x10 bass cabinets in? Like, let's just share one of these stupid things or share these stupid guitar cabinets. Like there's no point in like, trying to have this back line. Everybody's got the back line of the same freaking gear. Like it's ridiculous. It's silly.
Right. Yeah. The idea that you can actually be more efficient if you do it yourself rather than, everybody working on their own independent lanes. It's like, no, how about we just like combine forces and do this together? It's like, oh yeah, you're right. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, and just in terms of like, just getting things done. I've never understood, like, there doesn't need to be gatekeepers for certain things. You don't have it's very like putting on a show or whatever, like all that stuff. Like it's very easy. You find a room where you can be loud and have people, and you got to get a couple of like pieces of gear and you're good. You have a band come, make flyers, people will show up maybe if you're lucky. But I mean, it's really very simple, and once you sort of like crack the code, I don't know, like that sort of, that spirit is very self-empowering, I find, and still find.
What was like an early show that you put on that you were pretty proud of yourself for, doing? It doesn't necessarily have to be like, a really successful show, but what were you, I guess, proud of accomplishing?
Maybe like the early house shows we were doing. When I was in college, I had an apartment, like near, the college I was going to. And, it was one of these like, old New Orleans houses that was kind of split into like 4 apartments, but there was, like an above ground basement that was basically like a shitty basement where they just had the laundry machine. And, we just randomly started doing shows there, and it was awesome. Super fun, great space. Rarely had any kind of issues with the neighbors. It was just incredible. I mean, that really like kind of opened my eyes to like the potential of the sort of like transformative nature of spaces, that you could take, any old room and just turn it into this great space and have a blast.
Do you have any, I guess, funny interactions with, bands that you put on shows with originally as you were bringing them, down and playing, New Orleans for, maybe the first or maybe second time? Do you have any experiences that you were like, oh, wow, this is funny that this happened this way?
I mean, I could think of like different bands like trying to fight me and stuff. That band Riot Coalition, I had to cut them off one time. They tried to fight me over it. Have you heard that band Over It from? I want to say from Southern California, like a pop punk band from.
Of course, from the Santa Barbara area. Yeah.
Yeah, they tried to fight me. I actually got so pissed at those guys that this was back in the day when I had more of a temper. Like I like was threatening to just like fight all of them. It's kind of a long story with those guys, but. Basically, they had come on another show and been kind of turds and stolen some stuff from the opening band, and then came back for a second show, and I put on this second show and didn't pay them, and they got kind of pissed, and it just sort of escalated. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. Other than like me almost getting in altercations with bands. I'm not sure that anything too wild's ever happened.
I like the idea, kind of, picking apart those, early experiences that people have, because usually you have either, colossal errors because, you're just whatever, an 18-year-old inviting people that are, a couple years older than you to play a show. And then sometimes you're just like, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. Like, I should have got you guys water or something, you just like stuff that seems so basic, but then, you just like total head palm later on.
Yeah. I mean, I think my biggest thing early on was not like always thinking that the touring band would headline the show. And New Orleans just isn't that kind of city. And especially for like early on, the kind of bands I was bringing down, like these bands that no one's ever heard of in most places, let alone New Orleans. Like the idea that, oh, I can just sandwich this touring band between two local bands and people will stay for the touring band. Like that was something I had to learn kind of early on. And, not being as worried about, getting the band that was like the perfect fit for the touring band, sound wise, maybe, kind of leaning in a little bit to like getting bands that would bring out people for the touring band, was something I had to learn. And, stuff like that. The PA stuff was sort of like a learning curve for me. That was a headache early on, but, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always just kind of focused on these like smaller, like punk style shows and just kind of stuck with that. And even now when I do stuff, it's still like with that mentality, only maybe it's like at a space that has a PA or something, or has certain amenities, or I'm finding a competent person to like take care of that stuff for me and kicking them some cash or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Early days was a lot of scrapping, and I was always very poor, so like it wasn't like there was like money in my pocket to just dish out to bands or whatever. I wish I had done a lot less shows. I mean, that's the thing. Like I'm not a quick learner. Like I have to fuck it up like 1,000. Where other person might have to fuck it up like one time and learn, I might have to fuck it up like 1,000 times before it gets through like my thick skull. Oh, I need to change this, or I need to do this. Definitely stuff like making sure a band has like a nice, quiet, clean place to stay was like a thing I've like really focused on in later years, and making sure bands get like fed at shows. From when we start going on tour, that became like super important, super helpful. So that was definitely a thing, especially like post Katrina. I was doing that pretty heavily, cooking for bands at the show or before the show or whatever.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you give them a little taste of home while they're on tour or whatever.
Yeah, right.
If you're hearing this song on your phone, in your car, or in aisle 7 of the grocery store, you're not really hearing it. You're not really hearing the hypnotic disco synth as clearly as you could. You're not really feeling the bass line in your chest. And you're certainly not hearing a century of sound innovation. The only way to hear this song the way the artist intended is to hear it on a Denon home speaker. A speaker built with as much craft, dedication, and precision as the music it plays. Which means you won't just hear the song, you'll feel it. Denon home wireless speakers, crafted by the sound obsessed, for the sound obsessed.
I'm Marcel Swiley, that dude, and host of More To It, a new iHeart original podcast that takes a deep dive into the biggest topics in sports, entertainment, and culture. The journey begins with headline news, which leads to deeper discussions about life lessons that are presented in every story. Each week, we tackle subjects and issues beyond the public's perception and narrative to learn more about the stories and about ourselves. Hosted by someone who defied the odds to go from Compton to the Ivy League and then played 10 years serves as an all-pro defensive end. This is not your typical sports show, with topics ranging from the social ills that surround us all to the character growth that occurs from overcoming adversity. You'll get inspired hearing stories that highlight the growing pains that fuels anyone on a successful journey. You'll leave every episode with a greater understanding that no matter the story, the person, or outcome, there is always more to it. Found on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your favorite shows.
Our nation loves true crime, and it's no wonder. In the past decade, 1 in 4 Americans have reported being victims of crime. But what happens when we survive? That's what we explore in the podcast Survivors Heal, hosted by me, Oya El Shirelles. I've worked as an organizer, activist, and advocate for the past 15 years, and for the past 5 years, I've been on the ground floor providing services to survivors of crime. I invite you all to listen in as we discuss the healing side of true crime and what I call the new survivors movement. Listen to Survivors Heal, available on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
As you started to, tour and kind of get out there with Thou, do you like touring? Did you like the adventure of it, or were there things that you didn't, understand as you started to tour and be like, oh yeah, I didn't think I would miss that, or, any sort of, misconceptions that you had about touring?
Well, by the time I started touring with Thou, I started touring with friends' bands and then my bands in 2001, I think. And then by the time I was touring with Thou, it was 2007. So it had already been 6 years of going on at least one tour every summer, every year, if not more than one tour. So, at that point, I kind of knew what was up. The thing about the Thou tours and Thou touring is even the very first one we went on, which is probably I'd only played 2 shows with Thou at that point. And it was a tour I booked for another band that Andy from Thou was playing drums in, and then Thou hopped on it. That tour went surprisingly well, better than any tour I had been on previously. And for no reason. I mean, both band Thou and the other band we were on tour with, We Need to Talk, were obscure bands. It went really well. And the response to it was really great. And at that point I was sort of oh, well, shit, maybe Thou should tour a bunch. Maybe this could be a serious band for us, and we could go out on tour a bunch, and that's when things sort of escalated for us in terms of touring. I don't know if there's anything I really. I'm pretty easygoing with all that stuff. I do a lot of the driving. The driving doesn't bother me. All that stuff doesn't really bother me. The sleeping on floors and all that stuff doesn't really bother me. The food stuff, usually we can figure that out. I don't know. What else is there? To stay in right now the hardest thing for me is the staying up late, the show's going so late sometimes. I don't like to stay up super late anymore. I like to go to bed early. So usually when we go out now, that's my biggest issue. But even that, I mean, I don't know. We're
right.
Pretty...
You're I don't want to play at 11:30. Let's get this earlier.
I don't want to play at 9:30. I want the show to be over by 10 o'clock.
Totally. You want a 2-band bill. That's the sweet spot.
two bands sharing gear, playing 15-minute sets.
Oh, that's perfect. Show starts at 8, ends at 10. Done.
Oh, exactly.
After you joined Thou and you like I said, you started a tour, put out records and everything like that. Was it, interesting for you to kind of navigate the experience of, starting to get, and I use the word recognized in air quotes in regards to, being a public figure, quote unquote, and have people recognize, what the band was doing and appreciating the art and music and stuff like that. I realize, obviously, on a sliding scale of quote unquote stardom, the punk and metal and hardcore scene is a very low scale. But, was it interesting for people to start to pay attention to the art that you were putting out there?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I'm still kind of floored that people care about us at all, but I think that we're kind of lucky in the sense that, both musically and in terms of our popularity or whatever, our notoriety, it has sort of developed very incrementally. It's like baby steps. So there was never we've been doing it for however many years, and all of a sudden we're this is something. It's it just sort of kind of slowly built up to where it is now. The same way that any kind of changes or developments in our music is been very slow incremental progressions. It was never I don't know. It's never been a weird thing or a thing where I think any of us have gotten super big heads about it. I mean, and even when I sort of notice people sort of starting to do that kind of stuff now, it's when I'll usually write a few songs to try to do a little self-critique and knock us down a few notches in terms of that. Or I'll sort of take to social media and heavily ridicule us or ridicule any of our bandmates that are sort of stepping on a line or whatever. I don't know. We're very self-policing with all that stuff. And I think that being from New Orleans too, there's just, I don't know, you can only have so big of a head about that kind of shit.
Yeah. Well, you guys are very self-deprecating, and even though your art is serious and what you are creating is serious, you like you mentioned, you take the piss out of yourselves on social media and stuff like that. Do people I guess react negatively to it, or be I want my band to be as serious as the music they put out or whatever, or are people generally oh yeah, that's cool, they're real humans?
Oh, I mean, there's a mix of both of that stuff. I mean, how it is. There's people that take everything too seriously. So definitely if we're goofing off or whatever. I mean, there's people too that we'll be joking around about something and it just goes right over their heads. Or if I, one of us quotes some disparaging remark or review about us, we're doing it because we think it's funny and we like it. And it's not hurting our feelings, and we don't need anybody to sort of come to our defense or massage our egos or whatever. We think that stuff's hilarious. I would much rather see bad reviews and people sort of trying to tear us apart than the sort of mediocre, bland, generic, good review or whatever. The bad ones are way better. I've got a whole page on our website somewhere that's all kinds of just bad reviews and people talking shit and people trolling us on the internet, or I find stuff on message boards, people talking shit. I got a whole collection of that stuff on our website. So I love it.
It brings me joy. So go ahead and keep pouring that in.
Yeah, I listened to an interview with our friend Paul that from I guess the band he's known for now is the band Blood Incantation. But there was an interview with him recently where he was talking about he said something about loving his haters because they're sort of it's those people that are really putting the most energy into your band, really thinking about you, and he had this very new age esoteric take on it, but I thought that's hilarious, man. That stuff it's just like, who cares? Like, who cares? Like, why would I don't know. It's like I'm not in a band to entertain people or to like make friends or to like get some sort of like accolades or something. Like I don't care. Like I'm in a band because like I want to create art and put art out there that like I think is interesting. And if other people don't think it's interesting, well, that's fine. Like I don't think the majority of shit out there that people are doing or that people are into is interesting. So if all these boneheads that like all this dumb shit that I don't like our band, like that makes perfect sense to me. That should be how it goes. So if anything, it's like more surprising to me when our band does resonate with people who, for all intents and purposes, like I feel no connection to a lot of times, or no, like we have nothing in common in terms of like our shared interests.
Right. You're like, why do you like Thou? I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I just spent the last like 4 or 5 hours at the shop listening to like Fiona Apple. Like I don't care about Slayer or Morbid Angel or whatever. Like I don't want to talk to you about that. I don't care about whatever new death metal record. Like I don't give a shit. Like let's talk about the Smiths.
Yeah. Let's talk about obscure mid-90s metalcore. I don't care about legendary thrash metal bands. It's totally fine.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about that 6 Snapcase 7-inch.
The last thing I was going to hit on was everybody always brings up in every interview that I've seen published of yours was like, oh my gosh, you guys put out so much material. Like, you do so many splits, you do so many, cover songs, like the activity of the band, outstrips, most bands' ambitions. But for me personally, like what impresses me is your, continual evolution of the band. Like you were talking about earlier, the ability for you guys to put, stuff that is not similar to what you've done previously, or even a further stretch of it, like the most recent split you put out with Emma Ruth Rundle. What for you, I mean, you don't have to speak for the rest of your band, but for you, what would you say your kind of primary goal is? Is it, I guess out like the amount of stuff that you put out there, or is it kind of the longevity? Because, Thou has existed for a long time as well. So what's kind of more important to you, or are they both equally important?
I mean, I don't know if it's either of those things, because I'm not as interested in the amount as I am the quality of the material. And I don't know if I'm necessarily the longevity thing. Like, I don't know, because I personally kind of feel like, at least for me, the band has a sort of expiration date to it. At some point I'm going to feel too old to be screaming on stage, like, and maybe this is just by virtue of like what my role in the band is, but I think at some point, whether I'm 50 or 60 or 70, I'm gonna feel a bit foolish, like screaming into a microphone on stage while people stare at me through their cell phones. But definitely like having quality records that I can look back on and feel proud of, like creating art, putting together a record that like I can stand behind years from now. Like that's probably the most important thing to me. I would definitely like there to be more of those in our catalog than less, but I'll settle for like the best things we can put out. I mean, that's definitely, maybe that's the reason also why we've sort of like slowed down a bit in recent years, is the sort of the back end quality control is a lot higher than maybe it was when we were first doing the band. But also like that sense, that people have, I think, of us being like a super prolific band in terms of like releasing a ton of material. It's like, that's like a magic trick with us, because it's not like we like we do things in spurts where like we just write a lot of material at one time and record a lot of material at one time. And then it just sort of like gets parceled out, like the early days when we were doing a lot of splits, like, definitely that period between Peasant Summit, I think we recorded something like 13 or 14 songs in one recording session, like a weekend recording session. And then that stuff got parceled out to like, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 splits and EP and all this stuff. And, so it looks like we're like constantly churning stuff out, but it's like, it's usually like we come up with a batch of songs and record that batch of songs. And then the stuff sort of just gets parceled out. So I don't know. I think people maybe look at it wrong. I mean, maybe we are right. I guess we are writing a lot of stuff, but also like our material is also like for the most part on the longer side time wise. So we do a split 7-inch or split 12-inch with somebody. It's like, we've got 2 songs on there. It's not like, it's not like a Minor Threat. You half a side of a Minor Threat record with like 80 songs on it or something.
Right. Yeah. You're like we got 16 minutes and a song and a half there.
Right. Exactly.
This will be the last question. You are still very connected to obviously all of the DIY principles and everything that you have built up over time in regards to not only the band but your record store, and clearly still care about music. What keeps you, I guess, attached to it or motivated from that perspective? Because a lot of quote unquote normal people either age out of this or figure out other things for their life and kind of be like, oh, that all that stuff was like kind of kid stuff that I was into. What kind of keeps you attached to this?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I would ever refer to myself as an artiste. Just seems too pretentious. But like definitely like the excitement of creating art and being around people that create art and sort of being inspired by other people's art definitely keeps me coming back to it. My tastes are also like fairly broad. They're very specific, but they're also kind of broad. So like, I'm not like one of these people that I'm just into vegan, straight edge, 90s style hardcore, and I'm going to be into that for X amount of years. And then that's, like I like a lot of different things. So like when my, attention for something wanes, it's usually because it's waxing for something else. Like there's always sort of something to like catch my interest. And, I don't know. I've always like, I have a fairly strong work ethic when it comes to this stuff. I mean, I'm a world class procrastinator also, but eventually I'll get some work done. And I like the work. I mean, I like the stuff. I like, even with like booking shows, like, making flyers and stuff. I love that stuff. It's fun. It's fun. It's creative. And it's like, like I'm, especially with like punk, where you can just like, punk, like with punk stuff, like I feel like it gives me free reign to just like steal from wherever I want to steal from and reuse stuff and in ways that are like interesting to me. And to me, that means like, I don't have to be like the most skilled person in order to like accomplish something. Like I can be in this band that like does pretty good and I don't know how to sing. I'm just up there like screaming like an idiot, like, or like, if I want to like do a flyer or something, like I don't even need to know how to use like Photoshop or whatever. Like I literally still use, when I make flyers, I still have a typewriter, like a manual typewriter that I bang away on and get the text. And I go to Kinko's and I cut and paste stuff and I've got a Sharpie and I'm marking stuff up with a Sharpie and, and like, that's all it takes. And like, you can still do stuff that I think is like cool and worthwhile and interesting. clearly some people out there think that Thou is an interesting band, despite the fact that I am like not a musician, have no talent, could not talk to you about music stuff at all. Like that's punk to me. That's like what keeps me interested and like keeps me, trying to refine my meager skills, whatever they are, even if it's just like stealing from Pearl Jam or whatever.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for hanging out, dude. I really appreciate this, and I'm glad we were able to go different places. And I promise I won't lose this conversation.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully, I don't screw anything up on my end or whatever.
Thank you very much, Bryan, for coming on the show a second time, because the first conversation will be lost to the annals of history. But I felt like maybe I can look at it like the first conversation was priming the pump. It was a pre-interview, even though an hour-long pre-interview is a little ridiculous. But thank you, Bryan, for coming on the show again. And thank you to his publicist, Bailey, for hooking this up. So what do we have next week? Of course, we have another episode next week, like we always do, like clockwork, every Wednesday. And if it doesn't happen on Wednesday, something's gone terribly wrong. But we have Dylan Slocum from Spanish Love Songs on the podcast. This was one of my favorite records of 2020, and I had to have Dylan on. He's one of those people that I know we've traveled in the same orbit, but we've never met, and I was able to make it happen. So that's what we got next week. And until then, please be safe, everybody.
If you're hearing this song on your phone, in your car, or in aisle 7 of the grocery store, you're not really hearing it. You're not really hearing the hypnotic disco synth as clearly as you could. You're not really feeling the bass line in your chest. And you're certainly not hearing a century of sound innovation. The only way to hear this song the way the artist intended is to hear it on a Denon home speaker. A speaker built with as much craft, dedication, and precision as the music it plays. Which means you won't just hear the song, you'll feel it. Denon Home Wireless Speakers, crafted by the sound obsessed, for the sound obsessed.
I'm Marcellus Wiley, that dude, and host of More to It, a new iHeart original podcast that takes a deep dive into the biggest stories in sports, entertainment, and culture. We start with headline news and journey into deeper conversations, always finding those life lessons that are presented in every single story. Did you know why football is a great game of skill, but a greater game of will? You'll know when you listen to More to It on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your favorite shows.
Hey witches, I'm Ilaria Baldwin.
And I'm Michelle Campbell-Mason.
And together we host the new iHeartRadio podcast, Witches Anonymous. So bring your brooms and join us as we tackle why women are pinned against each other and what we can do to stop this vicious cycle. Consider this your invitation to Witches Anonymous because, witch, please, we're in this together.
Listen to Witches Anonymous on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.